Many professional analysts, private investigators, independent researchers, and journalists have used all of their resources to find any paper trail, documentation, online profiles, or records of public activity in regards to the life and existence of Adam Lanza. And to this date, it appears that none exist, at least within the last few years of his life. It's almost as if he disappeared a few years ago and suddenly showed up to town again to do the shooting. There is no online profiles, bank accounts, registrations for schools, cell phone accounts, or any other evidence that could determine his activities in the past few years. Adam's name was also omitted from his mother's obituary, which is said to be because it would offend the families in Newtown, but is something worth pointing out and adds to the mystery of Adam Lanza. The only proof we have that he did exist comes from early school photos when he was much younger, students that went to school with him and claimed he was the loner type and always carried around a briefcase, and a conversation between his aunt and his mother, which apparently exists on his mother's Facebook account. It would appear that his mother had an account, but he did not, although it is claimed that he could assemble a computer in seconds and exceeded in communications and computer-related studies. It is also claimed that Adam and his mother would regularly attend a shooting range, and that his mother was a gun enthusiast. However, a determined journalist visited every gun range in the surrounding area and found no records whatsoever of Nancy ever being registered. It has also been stated that all of the firearms that were used in the shooting were registered to his mother. However, there was an assault weapon ban in Connecticut, which means that if it were registered, she would be in possession of an illegal firearm. The weapons used were also common weapons seen used by law enforcement and people in the military, not commonly found in public possession for the most part. On the police audio recording, we hear an officer report he found long rifles and shotguns inside of the school, and adding the additional reports of 2 to 4 handguns found inside of the school and the shotgun that was found in the trunk, we are left with a total of over 6 guns, and that is only the guns that we know were reported or identified.
D5, be advised, we should have multiple weapons, including long rifles and shotguns.
It seems that guns were planted inside of the school, and it is to my opinion that there is much more to the life of Adam and Nancy Lanza than we are being told. It seems like they were set up as patsies for the crime, and whoever is responsible likely destroyed the hard drive on the computer because of incriminating evidence which could reveal what really happened. Did Adam Lanza really kill his mother, or was she killed by someone else, part of the group of suspects police were searching for? Could Adam have possibly been killed prior and brought to the school and planted as a patsy? These are questions that I have been asking myself and would explain many of the anomalies, such as reports from federal and local officials that are now said to be false according to the official story. This next testimony seems to tie into this theory, as if it were a team executing a carefully planned operation involving several suspects.
I heard 2 little boys screaming down the sidewalk, running, and one telling the other one to stop. They were running across the front of the firehouse, and a black car had pulled up to the firehouse, and the little boys were running screaming, one of them on a skateboard, and I saw the police department go up, like 7 or 8 police cars, and then within 45 seconds I heard a bunch of shots going off, and the little boys were running, and then a gentleman come up the road looking for his 2 little boys. So I don't know if they found them. I hope they did. But they were scared to death. So they must have gotten out of school and took off and ran down the sidewalk because they were screaming down the sidewalk. And all the police started coming, and that's about it. All this has been going on since.
Your son forgot something on Friday morning, so you went up to the school, and when you got there, you knew something was amiss, to say the least.
Yes.
What did you see?
There were like 8 or 10 kids who were, running basically towards the firehouse, and I, obviously thought that was odd. But when I got out of the car and started walking towards the building, I noticed a car, in the drop-off area in front of the entrance. Like a black hatchback, had all the doors open and like black sweatshirts strewn around it. And again, I thought, well, that's really odd. You don't usually see that at the school. And then I walked to the doorway, and there was another mom standing there, and all the while I'm thinking to myself, the building is so quiet, and why is it so quiet? And I said to her, is something going on? And she goes, I don't know, but look. And she pointed, and I looked, and next to the door where there's a buzzer, you have to buzz into the building, the whole plate glass window to the right of the door was shattered, and there was glass everywhere. And we looked at that and we said, well, you know, this is really strange. And as soon as those words kind of came out of our mouth, we started hearing gunshots. I knew that it was gunfire, but, you know, I just ran.
The black vehicle this parent saw must have been the suspect vehicle, as it was parked exactly where she described seeing the black vehicle with all of the doors open. After a moment, she said she heard shooting after first noticing that the glass on the front doors had been shattered, which would indicate that the sound from inside of the school could be heard much easier, since she did not hear the intercom with the gunshots and screaming. It must have been some time after the initial shooting began. She also claimed to have seen multiple jackets indicating more than one person, and could have been used to hide the guns before entering the school. Because all of the doors were open, it would indicate that whoever exited the vehicle did so in a hurry and did not take the time to close the door behind them. Since all of the doors were open and multiple jackets were witnessed, this would indicate more than one person or a group of people. What is very strange about this is that just like so many other aspects of this case, the doors opened are not seen in any photographs and has not been mentioned by anyone as holding relevance to the multiple suspects involved. Instead, the media and government continue to promote their story of a lone gunman and that no other suspects were involved. A tax document has recently surfaced belonging to Nancy Lanza, and on the list we can see that a Honda Civic is listed, indicating that she was making payments on a Honda Civic vehicle. Another document which is also surfaced shows that Christopher Rodia owned a '99 Chevrolet, which is proof that the vehicle did not belong to Rodia. It is likely that the Lanza vehicle was stolen after Nancy had been murdered and was driven to the school with Adam inside as the patsy, likely drugged in order to transport him to the scene of the crime more easily. Perhaps these suspects had to bring Adam inside of the school and did not have an extra hand available to close the doors behind them. If video surveillance was released, it would help answer many questions, but so far none have been released to the public. It would also reveal if Adam truly killed himself or if he was shot by another individual.
Stand by, I have units in front of the school. We're conducting an interior search at this time. The right for that.
This would also explain why Dr. Carver ordered that the body of Adam be kept for DNA analysis before it could be claimed by his father. This would allow time to detoxify and remove any signs of foul play. What makes this even more curious is that the Genealogy Bank's website claims that Adam Lanza died on Thursday, December 13th under the Social Security Death Index. This is indeed Adam Lanza's profile, and if we look at Nancy's profile, we see that she died on the date of the crime, December 14th. Even Emily Parker's profile states her death to be on December 14th, but Adams claims that he died before the incident occurred. If this date of death is correct according to the findings of an autopsy, then this verifies that he was killed prior to the attack and was planted on the scene as a patsy, along with all the extra guns, his mother murdered, and all records on the computer destroyed. The tactical officer that was reported by the Newtown Bee was likely a part of the operation, and the others caught fleeing the scene were likely involved in the operation as well. Upon further analysis of the helicopter footage, I came to notice the third person running, stop and start walking through the woods, looking back, and seeming to follow the other person. It's to my belief that this person is not a police officer, but another member of the team, fleeing from the scene. On the police scanner, we hear the officer chasing, and two suspects are detained, likely the two people that were veered to the right. The third person who ran straight is likely the suspect that police said was potentially still at large later in the audio recording, as he did not initially get caught.
Of the East Team people that are not already at the scene or nearby respond to Troop A. The last report was that there was one suspect that potentially was still at large, so I want them to set up an A in case we need to deploy him somewhere else.
The article also mentions the officer detained had a gun, and the suspect that was identified by a witness coming out of the woods was seen sitting in the front of the police car and not the back.
They did walk a guy out of the woods. I saw him walk a guy out earlier with handcuffs. He walked by us and said he didn't do it.
It was a grown man?
A grown man, yeah. He's sitting in the front of the police car over there now. So, I mean...
He didn't have a gun?
No, I didn't see any gun. Just had him handcuffed, and he walked by us and looked into parents' eyes and said I didn't do it.
How was he dressed?
Camo pants with a dark jacket. They did walk a guy out of the woods. I saw him walk a guy out earlier with handcuffs. He walked by us and said he didn't do it.
It was a grown man?
A grown man, yeah. He's sitting in the front of the police car over there now. So, I mean...
He didn't have a gun?
No, I didn't see any gun. Just had him handcuffed, and he walked by us and looked into parents' eyes and said I didn't do it.
How was he dressed?
Camo pants with a dark jacket.
Now, why would a suspect be kept in the front seat of a police vehicle after being arrested, unless he was some sort of government agent or someone in law enforcement? All of these anomalies seem to point to a highly top-secret, carefully planned out operation, and would also explain why so many of the media's reports that were claimed to come from federal and local officials were later claimed to be false. This method would divert people's attention and keep them focused on aspects of the case that would lead to dead ends or stray them from the truth. To destroy all of the evidence, the crime scenes, both the school and the Lanza home have been seized indefinitely, and all records relating to the crime have been sealed by the courts. Sandy Hook Elementary School is also scheduled to be torn down. The ones who control the media also control the courts and have access to any records and information the rest of the people are withheld from, making it hard for anyone to find out what really happened. Because of this, we may never know the truth, so it is important we continue to ask questions and demand explanations. These suspects, along with the first responders in the building, were likely all together, which would also explain why the first responders in the building were telling the other officers to stay clear, shots have stopped, and all is quiet in the building, to allow time for the others to get away, and so they had time inside to plant the guns in Adam, who was shot to ensure the patsy could never tell what happened. Even the medical crews were told to stay clear, not only because there were very few injured in the attack, but also to allow everything to be set up without a hitch, and to avoid any key members of the operation to fall under suspicion. As we have seen before, such as the instance of Lee Harvey Oswald, local authorities are not aware of agents' identities, and if anyone were to become aware of their identifications, they are kept quiet by bribes and threats. This is so that the truth is never leaked to the public. This would explain why the local authorities' stories changed so much and media sources were fed false information. A majority of these reports came from federal sources, so the news and media broadcasters must have thought it was official information.
This continues to be a very complex investigation, and there's a lot of contradictory information out there, but there is some new information this morning from a couple of federal officials and state officials. They say now that there were actually 4 handguns recovered inside the school, not just 2 as we were initially told.
Thank you, Governor. To all the families, first responders, to the community of Newtown, clergy, guests.
Just this year, Sandy Hook Elementary School put into place a security plan, making it mandatory for visitors to ring a doorbell and only be let in if staff recognized them through the video monitor. And if staff didn't recognize the visitor, he or she needed to present picture ID, sign in, and only then would be let into the school.
Every time we went to the school, you always had to press the button and they'd ask who you are to come in.
There was a masked man came in and just started shooting. So I don't know how he came in, because every time you go in you have to ring a bell and they can see you from the office and they know who you are and they let you in. So I don't know if it's somebody they knew.
When the events of Columbine took place, video surveillance from the school's cameras were later released to the public. After this event, security became a much more important matter, and a majority of schools installed many new security precautions to avoid future shootings and make students and parents feel more comfortable about the safety of their school. This is not only common in schools, as many businesses and public establishments have also implemented security cameras, such as shopping malls, department stores, libraries, and movie theaters. To this date, we have not been shown any video footage from the security cameras that were installed at Sandy Hook, which would show exactly what happened. Another incident in where we have not seen any video evidence is the Aurora shooting involving James Holmes. In similar fashion, witnesses described multiple suspects as proven on police scanner audio recordings, and details on what the public were told about the case remain highly questionable. Both the father of James Holmes and Adam Lanza have been indirectly linked to the massive LIBOR scandal, perhaps the largest banking fraud ever to unfold. The father of James Holmes has been attributed to creating algorithms which were used to uncover the LIBOR scandal, and the father of Adam Lanza is the tax director for General Electric, a corporation that paid no taxes last year, and 3 employees from the department overseen by Lanza were convicted and sent to prison on October 18, 2012, for their part in the LIBOR banking scheme. Many people believe the Aurora shooting and the Sandy Hook shooting are related, and along with the Sikh temple shooting, where a lone gunman was announced and multiple suspects were reported by witnesses, are all part of a planned series of shooting events in 2012 to push legislation to ban guns and disarm the public. Because of the multiple suspects witnessed in these 3 shootings and the reference to 3 strike zones on the Batman map, with Sandy Hook clearly listed, people have begun to connect the dots. Strangely, the props and map creator for The Dark Knight Rises was from Newtown and died in April of 2012 in a head-on collision, despite rumors of him being an excellent driver. Many people find his death suspicious and is just another aspect in a long list of coincidence or conspiracy in regards to all of this.
The first word was chilling. It only got worse.
They are reporting multiple fatalities involved in the shooting at the elementary school.
With each new report, the horror deepened.
Reports say the number of dead closer to 30 than to 20.
The most popular conspiracy theory regarding the Sandy Hook case claims that crisis actors were used in a majority of the roles and played characters involved in the incident. These claims state that no one actually died in the event, and that the entire thing was a false flag operation, set up in an attempt to intensify gun control or ban firearms altogether. These speculations have created a huge uproar in mainstream media and have caused an outright attack on anyone and all people who are questioning the official story. These claims reveal companies such as VisionBox, which specialize in actors that are available for active shooter and emergency drill type situations. VisionBox is based out of Denver, Colorado, and is the leading actor studio in the area. These actors are professionally trained to bring an aspect of realism to full-scale exercises and specialize in criminal and victims' behavior. Roles played by these actors include shooters, victims, civilians and bystanders, journalists and media reporters, employees, witnesses, and many other key positions in emergency-type scenarios. Sandy Hook Elementary also practiced emergency exercises in previous months, as the principal, Don Hodgsprung, posted tweets about these drills as early as October 17th. In these drills, the children and teachers were taught to exit the school in single file and to meet outside, as shown in this picture. Connecticut State Police were also quite trained in active shooter drills, as we have seen, and because there is only one picture of students actually exiting the school, showing just a handful of students out of the said 456 that attended the school, people believe that the entire incident was planned beforehand and was a full-scale drill-type scenario. We have not seen any footage from either security cameras or news coverage showing anyone actually leaving the school. If we examine the footage we do have, it would appear that there is a lack of commotion within the vicinity of the school grounds. There is very little emergency vehicles near the building itself, and as we know, the staging area was down the road at the firehouse to keep people away from the school and essentially away from seeing what was going on. It is to my belief that the first responders to the scene were controlling the situation entirely by keeping as many people away from the scene of the crime as possible, so that there could be less witnesses to what really happened inside and outside of the school. There are so many reasons why people do not believe the official story, and some of these include the constantly changing news reports and information regarding the case, the lack of photo and video evidence of the bodies and security footage from inside and outside of the school, the various tweets, fundraisers, tributes, and videos that were posted before the shooting, multiple suspects and obvious evidence of a group of people involved, the lack of information on Adam and Nancy Lanza, and the conflicting statements and strange behavior of some of the parties involved in this case.
The mom told me that there was over 100 shots inside the school.
100 shots?
Over 100 shots.
More than one shooter, or?
Yeah, just one. No, just one. Was just one shooter.
More than one shooter, or?
Yeah, just one. No.
So you talked to the person who called 911?
Yes, and she said that there was hundreds of shots.
Hundreds of shots?
That's what she said.
The state police have been managing the dissemination of information from the school there. We have received some additional information, but at this point in time, I'm not in a position to disclose that.
Do you have any information on the fact that more than 24 people were shot and killed at the school?
I can't verify that information.
And that 14 were children?
I cannot verify that information. I'm going to again refer you to the state police who have taken charge of the situation there, given the gravity and the impact on that community.
And as we said, they will be giving a press conference. We've been led to believe. Come over here, sir. We've been led to believe that they will be giving a press conference at 1 p.m. and we'll have the latest facts and figures and updates. We would suggest that be the resource for any further detailed information.
But when you saw those children on your yard, did you have any idea that something was wrong?
I had no idea. I thought they were doing a skit, or maybe they were Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts and they were just practicing. I thought I heard some gunshots, and sometimes I hear a deer hunter shooting and it's boom boom. But these were very staccato shots. They were very quick. Boom boom boom. And I thought, how obnoxious. Why would a hunter do that? But I didn't think much of it. I really didn't. I didn't think much of it.
When you saw those children on your yard, did you have any idea that something was wrong?
I had no idea. I thought they were doing a skit, or maybe they were Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts and they were just practicing, because they were sitting so nicely. But then I saw a man in a very agitated way saying it's going to be all right. And he kept raising his voice, and I thought that was so strange. And I came to the children, and they were crying and wailing and mortified. And there was a school bus driver with them, and I invited them into the house. And she said there had been an incident at the school. I had no idea what it was.
Gene, what did you see that morning?
I looked down and I saw 6 children, and I thought it was curious and why they're on my lawn. And I thought they were Cub Scouts or some children from the school doing a play. They were sitting in a regular fashion, and something was askew, because I saw this man talking in a very loud voice to them, saying, it's all right, it's all right. And I'm wondering, why was he talking so harshly to them? And I just kept walking, and I came and I saw them, and they were weeping, and they looked very frightened, and they almost looked out of breath, and they were just sitting right here, and they were sitting in a nice little way, like in a circle, like in a little reading group, and I couldn't imagine what happened to them. And the teacher said, the bus driver said, there's been an incident. So I said, come on inside, come on inside. And we walked up my driveway. And then they talked more, and the boy said, oh no, it was a big gun and a small gun. And then I knew.
Jane took in many of the children during the Sandy Hook shooting.
I was going to breakfast at a local diner, and I was ready to get into my car, and I looked down toward the end of my lawn, and I saw 6 children. And I was astounded at what they said. They said, I can't go back to the school. I can't go back to the school. I don't have a teacher. I don't have a teacher. And then the other boy said, Mrs. Soto, my teacher's been shot. I could not fathom this. I could not imagine what they were talking about. I did not correct them or ask them any questions. I let them keep talking, and they kept talking. I did not correct them or ask them any questions. I let them keep talking.
Some lady came looking for her son. I hope he's not one of the children. She said, I heard you had 6 kids here. I said, I took him to the firehouse. I said, I took him to the firehouse.
And what point, or at what point, do you reunite, or do the kids get reunited with their parents? And explain to me what that moment was like.
When their parents came, I was so happy. Their parents is what they needed. That was their lifeline after a day of blackness. They were with their teacher, the other guide in their life, and that teacher had been destroyed and assassinated. What's left? Their parents. That's the only thing that's left. And their parents came to the house. My arms were not long enough to put around them.
Friends and parents say Hucksprung was passionate and dedicated, tough but caring, and one said the kids loved her.
The principal, who, God bless her, lost her life, was just a very special person, and all the parents knew that.
Wolf Blitzer, CNN, Newtown, Connecticut.
There has been a great deal of speculation in regards to some of these crisis actors' claims, and some specific people have been mentioned, such as the Phelps family actually being actors from Florida belonging to the Sexton family. There is a resemblance when looking at photographs and comparing it to the Phelps video, and several other people have also been associated with other lookalikes. Some of these claims are simply ludicrous, however, and mainstream media has wasted no time in ridiculing these claims, targeting anyone who questions the authenticity of the information being stated by the news and mainstream media. By using the crisis actor theory as their ammunition, they have caused a large division amongst the public, as many people are quite disturbed over these claims and have now formed the opinion that anyone who disagrees with the official story lacks empathy and has no respect for the families or the victims of the crime, and also simultaneously diverts the attention of people who notice that the facts don't add up and begin to question the authority in these matters. By promoting the crisis actor story, media is also deterring people from questioning the multiple suspects that are involved, and if people believe that nobody died and it was all planned out, they do not concern themselves with the realities of this being an incident in where actual lives were lost, and that someone or a group of people are guilty of the crime. Many people who know victims of the shooting, residents of Newtown, and others associated with people involved in the events at Sandy Hook have become extremely offended by the allegations that actors were used and that no one actually died and felt suffering. The media has used this opportunity to ridicule all people that do not believe in what we have been told and have attributed conspiracy theorists with having mental illnesses, lacking empathy, and classified as the lunatic fringe, as I have heard it called. Because of these implications, petitions were started addressing the White House with a request to ban all conspiracy theory videos and articles in relation to the Sandy Hook conspiracy, and likely all materials that question these types of events and government in general. If this proves successful, our right to express our own thoughts and opinions, freedom of speech, and essentially other freedoms in life may also be in jeopardy. We would be forced to accept the lies and deceit spewed forth by government-controlled media sources, and anyone caught questioning the totalitarian empire would be criminally punished, and the term thought criminal will no longer be used in relation to fictitious works, but in fact it would be our reality and our way of life. The media has been using attacks on conspiracy theorists in an attempt to divide and conquer, a commonly used tactic in intelligence and military operations.
It is important to note that we have discussed with federal authorities that these issues are crimes. They will be investigated statewide and federally, and prosecution will take place when people perpetrating this information are identified. Again, all information relative to this case is coming from these microphones, and any information coming from other sources cannot be confirmed, and in many cases it's been found is inaccurate. So I simply, that's the newest twist today, that we want to make sure that's perfectly clear that social media websites that contain information relative to this case are not being posted by the Connecticut State Police, are not being posted by the Newtown Police, are not being posted by any authorities in this case. So any of that information and people that are putting that information up there in any manner, all right, that can be construed as a violation of state or federal law, will be prosecuted, will be investigated and prosecuted.
I have looked at this case from various perspectives and find it very hard to believe that everybody involved in this incident are actors, as I have seen so many genuine grievances over the loss of loved ones, friends and family. Many of these people were in shock at the time, and many testimonies I have seen are highly questionable and deceptive. However, those account for a small minority in comparison to the amount of people affected by this tragedy. There are simply too many people involved or associated in this event for it to be all faked, and a large amount of people would have confessed or said something to provide concrete evidence that this whole thing was faked. I do believe, however, that we are not being told all of the details, and that certain government factions had advanced knowledge of this attack and carefully planned for the shooting, setting everything up and using Adam Lanza as the patsy. The media has purposefully reported false details to confuse us and are using the actor theory to discredit anyone who is aware that there has been a massive cover-up. I am sure that the high-ups in the CIA, FBI, and the ATF have had a part to play in all of this because of the obvious media tampering, secrecy, and the unidentified suspects that were detained. It is entirely up to you what to believe in all of this, and it is highly encouraged to study these topics on your own, so that you may come to your own consensus. The truth of the matter is that we are heading into dangerous times, and the Sandy Hook shooting is just the beginning of this monumental period in human history. It is more important now, more than ever before, to be aware of what is happening and about to unfold, and those who are bright enough to see it will have the necessary knowledge to help bring resolution to the many problems we face as a society. The families and lives that were affected by the Newtown shooting deserve the proper justice for the loss of their loved ones, and it is important that we try to show the world what is really going on and where all of this is leading.
The growing conspiracy theories about the shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. If you don't know about this, you are going to be stunned. We were in Newtown last night, and a number of residents have been inundated with hateful messages, crank calls by people who believe they are part of a government and media conspiracy surrounding the shootings. Now, it's not just some internet extremists alleging these conspiracies. This is a guy named James Tracy, a tenured associate professor at Florida Atlantic University, a public school that's taxpayer funded. Now, as we told you first on Friday, Professor Tracy claims the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary did not happen as reported and may not have happened at all. Here's what he wrote originally on his personal blog, and I quote, "One is left to inquire whether the Sandy Hook shooting ever took place, at least in the way law enforcement authorities and the nation's news media have described." Now, as we told you Friday, normally we wouldn't dignify these types of remarks by covering them, but James Tracy is a tenured professor at a public university, and these claims by him and others online have begun to cause deep distress to victims' families.
You had 20 families that were mourning that buried children. Are you concerned about that at all?
Well, I think that the entire country mourned about Sandy Hook, and yet once again the investigation that journalistic institutions should have actually carried out never took place, as far as I'm concerned.
There's a lot of emotion involved with something like this. Is there anything that you want to say to that person at home that's going to throw their shoe at the TV and say, this guy is a total nut?
Well, I think that we need to, as a society, look at things more carefully. Perhaps we, as a society, have been conditioned to be duped.
Like all reporters, I believe in free speech, and Professor Tracy has the right to say whatever he wants. But as a teacher at a public university, we think he should be accountable for the things he says and being willing to defend them. So about that, Tracy makes the case, if you want to call it a case, that news organizations and the government may have worked together to dupe you, the public, in order to gain support for gun control law. Instead of seeing it as the fog of war or just incorrect reporting early on, have you seen a theme of why people believe that the media and the government are in cahoots to hire actors and make up killings?
And we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
We have quite a lot of detailed information, and we will evaluate it, and we will include any evidence of wrongdoing or any evidence of impropriety in our final report and make recommendations.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
So I want you to see this. Breaking. Police respond to report of school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. Few other details available. 7:25 a.m. December 14th.
Senator, do you think that you named the news organizations you finally report? That remains to be decided.
I think it was entirely in order for our correspondents at that time to make use of the CIA agent chiefs of station and other members of the executive staff of CIA as sources of information which were useful in their assessments of world conditions.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, It seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
Here's where the little bit of truth comes in, where conspiracy theorists, and most likely you, can agree. And if I'm Satan, this is how I do it every single time. I just take a little bit of truth and go, well, that's right. I know that's right. I know. But let me ask you this. Is it at least possible? You really know what happened on 9/11? And I start taking just little bits of facts and I start mixing them with out-and-out lies, provable lies. But then I tell you, yeah, but can you really trust that news organization to tell you the truth? I know they say that's wrong, but can you trust them? And now you find yourself in the exact situation that kid was in. Isolated, alone, not knowing who to trust. Everybody is against you. And you just want to feel something again. Something real again. That's what happened. And as a society, we are being led right down that rabbit hole. And we're being led by down that rabbit hole by people who are telling you right now, and not in the government, you can trust me. I'm your friend. I'm the friend of the Constitution.
According to the secret reports, Antonio Viciana, a leader of anti-Castro Cubans directed by the CIA, saw Oswald talking to a senior CIA agent he knew by the cover name Maurice Bishop. Viciana provided enough information for House investigators to compile this sketch of the agent who met Oswald. Could it have been Phillips? Investigators believe it was. Phillips denied under oath that he knew Oswald, but House investigators did not believe him and wanted him charged with perjury. The government declined to prosecute, leaving investigators furious. The director of the CIA in 1963 was John McCone. He caused a sensation among committee staffers when he admitted there was an agent using the cover name Bishop. But a secret memo reveals he was allowed to reverse his testimony. A CIA lawyer wrote the committee, "I should inform you that he had been in error." In summary, Mr. McCone withdraws his statements on this point. The man who fingered Maurice Bishop, Antonio Viciana, was shot in the head soon after testifying, but survived. Frightened, he will no longer talk about the case. We caught up with him in Florida.
They wounded me in the head. They're trying to kill me.
You know why? Why would anyone?
I don't know. Perhaps the FBI knows. The FBI knows.
Did they tell you?
No. Actually,
David Adley Phillips died of cancer in 1988. Investigators believe Phillips was angry at JFK for botching the Cuban Bay of Pigs operation.
Did you kill the president?
The second explosive revelation in the sealed documents also links the CIA directly to Oswald. While living in Dallas, Oswald was befriended by Russian-born George de Mohrenschildt. Investigators determined he was a contract agent for the CIA in Central America and the Caribbean. In 1977, moments before he was to be interviewed by House investigators, de Mohrenschildt blew his brains out with a 20-gauge shotgun. House investigators believe he was a crucial link between the CIA and Lee Harvey Oswald.
There is no question that the sealed JFK files are extremely embarrassing for the CIA. House investigators have told Inside Edition that the agency did not fully cooperate in their investigation and that the CIA had final say in the report that the House Assassinations Committee made public. Thus, the public report makes no mention of the CIA's links with Lee Harvey Oswald. But the secret documents are another story.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last nail is being driven into the coffin of the American Republic, yet Congress remains in total denial as our liberties are rapidly fading before our eyes. The process is propelled by unwarranted fear and ignorance as to the true meaning of liberty. It is driven by economic myths, fallacies, and irrational good intentions. The rule of law is constantly rejected, and authoritarian answers are offered as panaceas for all our problems. Runaway welfarism is used to benefit the rich at the expense of the middle class. Who would have ever thought that the current generation and Congress would stand idly by and watch such a rapid disintegration of the American Republic? Characteristic of this epic event is the casual acceptance by the people and the political leaders of the unitary presidency, which is equivalent to granting dictatorial powers to the president. Our presidents can now, on their own, order assassinations, including American citizens, operate secret military tribunals, engage in torture, enforce indefinite imprisonments without due process, order searches and seizures without proper warrants, gutting the Fourth Amendment, ignore the 60-day rule for reporting to the Congress the nature of any military operation as required by the War Powers Resolution, continue the Patriot Act abuses without oversight, wage war at will, treat all Americans as suspected terrorists at airports with TSA groping and nude x-ray. And the Federal Reserve accommodates by counterfeiting the funds needed and not paid for by taxation and borrowing, permitting runaway spending, endless debt, and special interest bailouts. And all of this is not enough.
People should be on the television, on the radio, as much as we possibly can, and telling these youngsters that it's wrong to carry a gun, and that if you have information about people who are carrying guns, you've got to share that with Chief Thomas and with his people as well. I've also asked the school board to make a part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
And by targeting the groups that are responsible for violence throughout this city and eventually the entire state of Connecticut. I think it's really important. The entire state of Connecticut. Project Longevity will send a powerful message to those who would harm their fellow citizens that such acts will not be tolerated.
America's top law enforcement official found in contempt of Congress.
The resolution is agreed to.
Thursday, the Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives reprimanded Attorney General Eric Holder for failing to release internal Justice Department documents related to a botched government investigation into gun running. Known as Fast and Furious, the plan allowed thousands of weapons to be purchased in the United States and smuggled into Mexico, in the hope it would lead authorities to the leaders of Mexican drug cartels. But most of those guns went missing. Many are believed to have found their way to drug gangs, and 2 were found at the site of a shootout that killed Brian Terry, a U.S. Border Patrol agent.
Fast and Furious, the Department of Justice permitted sale of more than 2,000 weapons that fell into the hands of the Mexican drug cartels was both reckless and inexcusable. We still have unanswered questions.
Did Lanny Brewer know better than what was represented in the February the 4th letter? Was he privy to either of these 2 memos, the July 5th, 2010? He said he was briefed April 2010. And by the way, what office does Lanny Brewer hold in the Department of Justice?
He's the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division.
And why would Lanny Brewer, knowing as he did back in April 2010 about Operation Fast and Furious, allow a letter that went out on the department stationery February the 4th, 2011, why would he let a letter that was false
represent the position of the Department of Justice?
Well, first off, the briefing, the Blue and AAG Brewer brief, that was about wide receiver. That wasn't about Fast and Furious.
By the way, do you know the differences between wide receiver and Fast and Furious?
I mean, do I know that they're different operations?
Right. And so do you know the differences, the factual differences between wide receiver and Fast and Furious?
Well, I mean, there are a number of differences, both I think in scope, both in terms of time. The Bush administration was the one that started wide receiver. The Obama administration is where Fast and Furious began.
Does it surprise you that these boxes, 5 boxes, represent just what one gun dealer gave us voluntarily? Well, in fact, this seems to be all the information you have responsive to our subpoena. Does it cause you to think that, in fact, we believe you were withholding documents? We believe that, in fact, there is more production. So my final question, and you can answer all of them for as long as the chairman wants, is do you today have documents responsive to the lawful request of the Oversight Committee that have not yet been granted?
All right, well, let me go back to my first answer that I was not...
Well, mine's pretty easy. Mine's a yes or no, and then the others you're going to go on for a while.
I'll get to that.
Would you please get to it first?
Gary Grindler, he was not provided with a detailed analysis of Fast and Furious. He was given information about
Mr. Chairman, I asked earlier that the Attorney General be placed under oath. I was denied that. But what I will make the point is that it is not productive for anyone to come before this committee and tell us what somebody else didn't know. That is exactly how the legislative liaison behind the Attorney General, Mr. Weish, came and gave false testimony to my committee. False because people who are still working for the Attorney General knowingly gave him misleading information in addition to the U.S. Attorney, and no action has been taken.
The Mexican government complains that they were not informed about the Fast and Furious operation. Did you authorize this operation, and was President Calderon properly informed about it?
Well, first of all, I did not authorize it. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, did not authorize it. He's been very clear that our policy is to catch gun runners and put them into jail. So what he's done is he's assigned an IG, an Inspector General, to investigate what exactly happened here.
Who authorized it?
Well, we don't have all the facts. That's why the IG is in business.
You were not even informed about it?
Absolutely not. This is a pretty big government. The United States government. I've got a lot of moving parts.
They were hoping that President Obama would hear her words tonight if we could get them read on air. So she gave me a letter, and unfortunately there were too many people at the wake for me to get up to actually see the family, so the letter was passed back to me.
Okay.
But this is what she wrote, and if you could read it, because I can't.
Okay. But the family gave permission.
The family wants, they told me to bring it to you.
Okay. It says, my name is Natalie Barden, and I wanted to tell the president that only police officers and the military should get guns. If people want to do it as a sport, then they could go to a shooting range and the guns would not be able to leave there. So that's what she wants President Obama to hear.
She wants, yeah, this is what the question she wanted to ask him.
What was it like spending time with President Obama? Was that helpful for you all?
To be honest, it was a little less fruitful than we were hoping. James and our daughter Natalie had a few things that they were hoping to express to him out of concern for the fact that this situation happened at all, and how we can maybe hopefully stop this from happening again. My daughter Natalie was interested in asking him if he could pass some kind of legislation so that the only people that had guns were military personnel and law enforcement, and if people needed guns for sport, that they could go to a range and the guns would have to stay there. That was my 10-year-old daughter. That was all her own original thought. That was all her own original thought.
They are as determined as ever.
Mr. Chairman, small arms and light weapons are truly weapons of mass destruction.
The United Nations conspiring with the majority of its members to do what they've already done to their own citizens. Deny you your firearm freedom.
In New York, right here in our own shores, we've got a Trojan horse. They want to set
U.S. firearms policy. They want to take the decision away from the U.S. electorate and undermine our Constitution.
That's really their ultimate agenda, to bring the United States down from the pinnacle of freedom to simply being another one of these socialist states where the government controls everything.
And just who are these gun grabbers? Countries like Japan.
We strictly punish and control the possession and the use of small arms by civilians.
Britain and Australia.
Firearm owners in Australia must also demonstrate a genuine reason for ownership.
The Netherlands.
It's my firm conviction that the illicit trade cannot be tackled without involving the legal arms trade.
And Canada, led by its former Minister of Justice, Alan Rock.
Registration is the cornerstone of the entire strategy.
Alan Rock is now Canada's voice at the United Nations. His anti-gun agenda is now front and center at the world stage. That's scary.
Scary because the United Nations continues to get away with what it does best.
It's a stealth operation.
Secretly scheming behind closed doors to outlaw your guns.
We must not wait until 2006.
Accountable to no one.
People don't get elected to the UN. And that's the really scary thing. How the hell do you get rid of a UN bureaucrat?
These are the biggest human rights violators in the world, and they're trying to tell people in the United States that we shouldn't have certain civil liberties.
But the UN is not pushing its agenda alone. There's a propaganda machine working every day, targeting the NRA and gun ownership as evil. It's called IANSA, the International Action Network on Small Arms.
This is not about military small arms. This is not about rocket launchers.
What they're really after is my Winchester hunting rifle.
Just log on to IANSA's website, and you'll see it's made up of more than 500 anti-gun NGOs, or non-governmental organizations.
They are absolutely awesome in terms of the power they have.
Power and a plot that is being engineered right here in London, in that building behind me where IANSA is headquartered. Imagine, nearly 230 years after the American Revolution, there are still forces at work here on British soil, determined to trample on your freedoms.
In fact, there's 20,000 gun laws on the books. And thanks to one of them in Texas that restricted carrying a concealed weapon, Susanna Hupp, well, let her tell her story.
Back in 1991, I was with my parents at a local restaurant, and we had just finished eating when a madman drove his truck through the window and very methodically began executing people. And he wasn't spraying bullets. He had complete control over the situation. He was simply walking from one person to the next, taking aim, pulling the trigger.
And this guy kept shooting, and you're thinking, what could it be? Is it a robbery? That's the first thing that generally comes to mind. And he keeps shooting. It took me a good 45 seconds to realize that this man wasn't there to commit a robbery. He wasn't there for a hit. He was there to simply shoot as many people as he possibly could. When I finally realized what was occurring, I thought, I got him. And I reached for my purse. He was maybe 12 feet away. Is it possible my gun could have jammed? Sure. Is it possible I could have missed? Sure. But I can tell you I've hit much smaller targets at much greater distances. But then I realized that a couple of months earlier I had made the stupidest decision of my life. I took my gun out of my purse and left it in my car. Because as you well know, in the state of Texas, it's sometimes a felony offense to carry a gun in your purse. My father, at that point, said, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. He's going to kill everybody in here, and he rushed the man. No way. This guy turned, shot him in the chest. He went down, was obviously mortally wounded. For whatever reason, that made the man change directions and go off to my left. Shortly thereafter, someone at the back of the restaurant broke out a window. When I saw what looked like an opportunity to escape, I turned around and I grabbed my mother by the shirt and I said, come on, we've got to run, we've got to get out of here. And then my feet grew wings and I was out the back window. As soon as I got out, I realized that my mother had not followed me out. And as I learned from the police officers, she had crawled over to where my father was and cradled him until the guy got back around to her, put the gun to her head. She looked up at him, put her head down, and he pulled the trigger. My parents had just had their 47th wedding anniversary. She wasn't going anywhere.
You might think Susanna would be in favor of stricter gun control laws. You'd be wrong. She actually had a gun with her that afternoon, but in the days before right to carry legislation, the law required that she leave it in her car.
I was angry at myself for having made what I realize now was an incredibly stupid decision to obey a bad law and allow my family to get killed. And I was mad at my legislature because I absolutely felt that they had legislated me out of the right to protect myself and my family.
Just one final statement. I've been sitting here getting more and more fed up with all of this talk about these pieces of machinery having no legitimate sporting purpose, no legitimate hunting purpose. People, that is not the point of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not about duck hunting. And I know I'm not going to make very many friends saying this, but it's about our right, all of our rights, to be able to protect ourselves from all of you guys up there.
I'd give up my gun when everybody else does.
And is that
doesn't that make sense?
Well,
doesn't that make sense? I mean, if you were to, if there were guns here, would you want to be the only person without one?
So do you carry guns routinely at home? I mean, you have a gun at home?
Yeah, it's legal in the United States. It's part of our Constitution. You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny. Not to hunt. It's to protect yourself from the police.
And do you see any link between that and these sorts of incidents?
No. Nah, not really. You know what I'm saying? If somebody wants to kill people, you know, they don't need a gun to do it.
For a man who is a patriot, who purports to love his country, that was quite shocking disrespect to your president.
Let me put it in official CNN Piers Morgan interview terms, shall I?
Yes.
My limey friend?
Yes.
Anybody that wants to disarm me can drop dead. Anybody that wants to make me unarmed and helpless, people that want to literally create the proven places where more innocents are killed, called gun-free zones, we're going to beat you. We're going to vote you out of office or suck on my machine gun. You can take it whichever way you want.
Much as I'd love to suck on your machine gun, the whole point of your defense is that a lot of people do drop dead precisely because you are armed to the teeth, and you'd like everybody else to be.
Not true at all.
80 people.
Write this down. See, you're so rich.
You write this down. 80 people a day die in America from gunshots.
And 75 of them to 78 of them, statistics by the Uniform Crime Report by the FBI and the UN Study on Violent Crime, 78 of those 80 are let out of their cages by corrupt judges and prosecutors who know that recidivism is out of control, know that they'll commit the crimes again, and they let them walk through plea bargaining, early release, and programs.
They still
Kiss my ass.
Yeah.
Where you have the most armed citizens in America, you have the lowest violent crime rate. Where you have the worst gun control, you have the highest crime rate. Piers, choose one. Do you want a lot of crime? We have it. Gun-free zones. Do you want less crime? We have that. More people with concealed weapons permit. Why do you guys resist that statistic?
Well, don't say you guys.
It's you guys.
No.
Well, unless you're playing the devil's advocate.
I can play any advocate I like.
You're
it's
doing
my
a fine
show.
job.
Right.
You're playing the idiot's advocate here.
That's not the idiot's
More
advocate.
guns equals less crime. Period.
Unless I'm wrong, and I don't want to kiss your ass at this point, if you don't mind. Unless I'm wrong with your argument, well, you're basically saying that 90% of the gun crime comes from people let out of prison.
It's 96%.
Right.
But go ahead.
But they still have to get access to firearms. If you had your way, there would be 10 times as many firearms, right?
Not true at all.
You want everyone in America to own a gun?
Not at all. I've never said that.
What's your position?
And I got to tell you,
what is your position?
And I hope you don't edit this out. Whenever I've done interviews with guys that are inclined to be anti-gun, they always go, well, Nugent wants everybody to have a machine gun. Nugent wants all the deer dead.
What does Nugent want?
Not even close.
What do you want?
What I want is the Second Amendment. We the people, free individuals to have the right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. Find fault with that.
Back now with Jesse Ventura and our live studio audience. Gun control. This is something I've been very animated about all this year with all the various gun outrages, especially the appalling thing at the cinema in Colorado. Why is it that Americans, to me it seems, so many Americans cannot divorce their right to defend themselves with a gun to the apparent right to go and buy 6,000 rounds of ammunition, high-powered assault weapons, and go and murder Americans?
Well, the best thing I can tell you, Piers, is this. Mexico has strict gun control. You cannot own a gun in Mexico, and they had 20,000 people dead last year in the drug cartel wars.
But Mexico has a very particular problem involving drugs. I can cite you Britain, average, well, let me just throw it back at you. In Britain, for example, an average of 35 people a year are murdered with guns. In Germany, it's about 40 to 50. France, the same. Spain, the same. Italy, there's a pattern here. America, 11 to 12,000 a year. This country has more guns than anybody else and more gun murders. It's inarguable, isn't it?
No, not at all.
It is.
Because I was in the Philippines physically the day Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and made himself a dictator, and the first thing that dictator did, he gave the people of the Philippines 2 weeks to turn in all their guns or it was the death penalty. Now, why would a dictator do that? Why would he make his #1 priority when he took over as dictator to disarm the public? The Second Amendment is there, and it was put in there not for hunting and fishing like they like to say, because back when they did it, if you didn't hunt or fish, you didn't eat. It was put in there so the citizens would have the ability, if their government became oppressive, they could defend themselves against oppressive government. And I think that overrules all the gun deaths, because let's remember something, a gun is simply a tool. I have a gun safe at home, and I've never come home and heard those guns going off on their own. People kill people. All right, how many people here die because of car accidents of drunk driving? Do we go to the Ford Motor Company and tell them stop making these automobiles because people get drunk and kill people in cars?
It's a facile argument.
It's a what?
It's a facile argument. There's no equivalence between drunk driving and lethal firearms. My point is...
Wait a minute. A car is a 2,000-pound projectile that can go 100 miles an hour.
Jesse, I have no problem with an American believing that their right under the Constitution is that they can defend themselves, especially in their own home, if they're being attacked and they have a weapon.
It's also against government.
I have a big problem with a disturbed young man, as we saw in Colorado, being able to buy 6,000 rounds of ammunition and a high-powered assault weapon and go into a movie theater and blow away 70 Americans. I have a big problem with that. And nobody else in America in high office seems to share that big problem.
Well, I'll tell you what, Piers, I have a conceal and carry license. Had I been in there, I would have taken this guy out before he could have killed that many people.
Well, I think that, again...
But because, let's remember, police can't stop crimes. Police show up after they're over. Remember that. So when you talk about me not being able, if there would have been a legitimate conceal and carry in that theater, quite possibly they could have taken this guy out and saved people's lives.
Or you could have had the gunfight at the OK Corral in there and lost even more lives, couldn't you? That's what could happen. Anyway, let's take a break.
Well, what roll of the dice would you like? You'd prefer to be unarmed? How many people here think I make crackpot points?
Yeah.
1. How many think I make sensible points? You're in a minority, my good friend. You're the minority.
I said you made some sensible points. Let's go to another audience question from Jared.
Albert Pike was a U.S. attorney, Confederate officer, writer, and is considered to be the father of modern Freemasonry. If you are unsure of what Freemasonry is, it is a fraternal organization or secret society in which almost every town and city has a lodge. Members of these lodges include many important figures involved in the community, such as bankers, government officials, law enforcement, judges, lawyers, and many other positions of importance in relation to the maintaining and control over a community. Chances are, if you look around your own community, you will find a Masonic lodge with links to the town's history and development. Because of his contributions to Freemasonry, Albert Pike is highly regarded and has a monument at Judiciary Square in Washington. In 1871, Pike wrote a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, whom has been accredited for founding the Sicilian Mafia and was a 33rd degree Freemason in Italy. In this letter, Pike described a vision that he had and in great detail described 3 world wars. Many people believe that this letter was actually a plan set out to be followed by initiates in order to create a one-world government system deeply rooted in Freemasonry. The details of each war have unfolded exactly as Pike had described, which has led many people to confirm that the first 2 wars were planned beforehand and that a 3rd World War, and the bloodiest and most destructive of them all, has yet to take place. Because of the astonishing accuracy to this letter, which was written well before any wars were termed world wars, it is important to consider this when taking a look at what is happening in our world today. According to Pike's letter, the First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agentur or agents of the Illuminati between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Pike went on to say, the Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time we would need it for the final social cataclysm. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere, the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out of the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary moment, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. It would seem that in order to ensure that revolutionaries do not gain the upper hand in regards to this final war, the world government system, or the United Nations, has been on a mission to slowly disarm the people in many countries so that there is no threat by the public against those in government and law enforcement. It is to my belief that when the United Nations tries to enforce a gun ban in the United States and Canada, it will be a major factor in the start of this Third World War. Many people see past the lies and the deception and are not willing to allow a government that manufactures weapons and actively engages itself in war and terrorist events to leave them defenseless by disarming them. If a gun ban proves successful, then who would be left with the guns? The answer to this question is sadly the same infrastructure which has contributed to a majority of the evil that exists on this planet, and to allow these criminals exclusive access to these weapons is to officially give up our rights and freedoms in the name of martial law, and the world empire known as the United Nations would continue to gain its stronghold in this real-life game of risk. The same organization involved in the active shooter drills and emergency services training, FEMA, has taken the precautionary steps to prepare themselves for a public retaliation against government and are fully prepared to kill as many people as needed to ensure the continuance of government and world policy.
this little new cut road divided this field, and the right side of the road was filled with, which I thought was portable toilets. I never looked at them that close. Same in color, maybe black, but which was an odd color. And I was sitting there going over my notes, and a van pulled alongside of me that turned out to be the property owner. And he greeted me, and he was by himself, and so we had a good little dialogue there, and I asked him about the field of black boxes. What were they? Because I'd never seen anything like that, and his statement was that if he told me, I would be one of few people in Madison, Georgia that knew about them. And he says they're disposable coffins, I believe he told me. And he says there's 100, at that time he said there was 125,000 there. And they were stacked, he told me 15 high. I asked him who owned them, and he stated that the CDC owned them, and that they were leasing the land, leasing his land for storage. And he said his brother worked with the CDC in Atlanta and had been asked by the CDC to do a 3-year extension to place temporary morgues all across the nation.
The question of
Virginia Tech,
Tucson,
Aurora,
Fort Hood, Oak Creek, Newtown,
Newtown,
Newtown.
Newtown.
How many more? How many more? How many more colleges? How many more classrooms?
How many more movie theaters?
How many more houses of faith?
How many more shopping malls?
How many more street corners?
How many more?
How many more?
Enough. 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 Enough.
Demand a plan.
Right now. As a mom.
As a dad. As a friend. As a husband.
As a wife.
As an American.
As an American. As an American.
As a human being.
For the children of Sandy Hook. Demand a plan. No more lists of names. It's not too soon.
It's too late.
Now is the time.
Before we all know someone who loved someone on that list.
No more lists.
No more.
Who they might have been. No more.
If we had just done something yesterday. It's time.
We can do better than this.
We can do better than this.
It's time.
It's time.
It's time for our leaders to act. Demand a plan.
right now.
Right now.
You! Demand it!
Enough.
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 Northwoods, Gulf of Tonkin,
Gladio,
Kent State,
Ruby Ridge, Waco,
Oklahoma City,
the World Trade Center,
the Pentagon,
Shanksville,
Hurricane Katrina.
Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious.
How many more?
How many more?
How many more false flags? How many more? How many more government buildings?
How many more innocent people?
How many more?
How many more?
What has been the #1 cause of unnatural death in history?
Democide, or death by government, has killed 290 million people on record.
290 million people. Killed.
290 million.
Killed by government.
The government.
The #1 killer in history is democide.
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 Death by government.
Look it up. Go look it up. In the 20th century, government murdered 4 times as many people as were killed in all the international and domestic wars combined.
USSR. 61,911,000 people killed.
Hitler's Germany. Nearly 21 million people killed.
Japan's imperialism. Nearly 6 million people killed.
Western colonization killed over 50 million people.
Pol Pot's Cambodia, funded by the U.S. government. 2 million people killed. China's Communist Party, as many as 76 million people killed between 1949 and 1987.
And the list goes on and on.
We're talking to Mike Powers today, who has previous law enforcement background, among other things, military background. And we're trying to get to what we do know versus what we have been told. And we have a right to do that because there are those of us who do not trust the criminal element of the U.S. government. And there is a criminal element of the U.S. government.
The evidence handling protocols and procedures that were used in this situation from beginning to end have drawn questionable opinions from professionals from all over the industries, from law enforcement to the gun industry to anybody out there that just knows what's right in front of them when they see it. And there's a couple of the other points we're going to address when we get to it, that especially about that evidence handling procedure and some of the way the media has portrayed this presents some very dangerous things in our opinions, which is why we're here today. The alleged attacker appeared at the school wearing a mask to conceal his identity. So to this point, what we have is the quote-unquote official story, which unfortunately, and no pun intended, is shot full of holes. There has been no conclusive evidence to prove that Adam Lanza ever existed. On multiple different public records and resources sites, we've had no luck whatsoever in locating anything to indicate that he was ever actually a real person. We found tons on his brother Ryan, but nothing on Adam himself. And there is an interesting anomaly that takes place in 2009 where Adam kind of, like, according to the media, drops right off the face of the planet, no longer has an electronic footprint. So many of the other just blatant, dishonest inconsistencies that come up in these things, because as we know, this is the information age. People with access to the internet, people with access to public record search sites that, $24.95 a month, and you can background anybody, anything, anywhere. Adam is an enigma at best. The individual just completely has no indication of ever having been anywhere. And that's kind of what initially drew myself and my colleagues' attention to this situation. Was as it immediately began, the first thing that we thought was, oh my God, not again, cannot believe this. These just keep happening. And that's what initially spurred the desire to investigate this, because the story started to change so many times, because there were so many inconsistencies, because none of this stuff added up. Which only redoubles all of our opinions in this matter of how could this individual walk into an enclosed space with an unsuppressed carbine and fire off, according to, again, Connecticut State Police Lieutenant J. Paul Vance, quote, hundreds. He fired hundreds of rounds in the school and was still carrying on his person hundreds more that he had not discharged. And essentially you're talking about a 165 decibel or better percussive impact on the human nervous system inside an enclosed space like that, and that's simply just not possible. The disorienting effects. I actually had 2 telephone interviews with 2 doctors of audiology yesterday, and this is the levels that we take our investigation to. I'm not going to assess it based on my own personal information, my own personal level of training. I'm going to take this to industry professionals who have doctorates in these matters to make sure that my information is correct, and both of those doctors of audiology have indicated that the impact on the cochlear tube of the inner ear would be devastating under those conditions, that the individual would lose balance, he would lose cognitive ability just from the sheer shock of the incident. So it's all of these things. It's not just one isolated thing. It's not just one minor detail. It's the entire pile of all of the details from all the different directions. So, and that's why one of the main reasons we're committed to this, and this is what we've told our elected officials, we've called, that if this is to be the catalyst that fundamentally changes this nation at its core constitutionally and strips away 250 years of right, privilege, and tradition, that we're not going to go down without a fight. In order for him to be in full compliance with the story and actually carrying those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds, what that indicates to me is that he would have to have magazine pouches on both sides at the best. So this kid is $120, 120 pounds. He's allegedly autistic or has some form of developmental disability that they still haven't gotten completely specific on yet, but they've alluded to Asperger's. They say that he came into the building approximately carrying and wearing his body weight in kit and ammunition and everything else, weapons and whatnot. He had 4 handguns. Well, then he had 2 handguns. Well, then he had a rifle. Well, then he had 2 handguns and a rifle. Then he had 1 pistol and a rifle. They can't make up their mind. Now, I'll point your listeners back to the tragedies of, say, the D.C. sniper. The very moment they took the D.C. sniper into custody, within minutes, the media had pictures of the AR-15 rifle out. The guy's hanging it through his pinky fingers. This was the monster. This was the beast. You've not seen a single picture of any of the weapons, of any of the kit. This is also to tie into Aurora, Colorado, with James Egan Holmes, all of these other most recent incidents, with the exception of Jared Lee Lochner, because they said he only had 1 weapon, a Glock 9mm pistol, so of course they could take stock images of that. But the most disturbing issues we have right now, and Aurora actually directly ties into this because there's equally as many questions to ask there, both in evidence handling procedures, the official story, how in each one of these scenarios it's played out all the way back through the Sikh temple and all these other mass shooting incidents, that eyewitnesses have reported multiple shooters. All of them have reported multiple shooters. The literal definition of insanity is attempting the same process multiple times and expecting a different result. Well, we're not getting different results. We're getting solid, conclusive evidence, and in the investigative field, that's called incontestable. So then that's kind of where we're going now, is we're going to get to the bottom of this one way or the other.